episode 277 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. This is Aaron Brightman coming to you for a third time on Tuesday, January 23rd. This is the one I planned on doing all along, and that was the inevitable announcement that Rutgers commits Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper were announced as high school All-Americans on Tuesday. Just the second and third in program history. Mike Rosario back in 2008 was the other, and Rutgers now just one of five schools in this cycle, 2024, to have multiple commits earn McDonald's All-America status. That includes Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Alabama. So, a few thoughts. First of all, it's been a disappointing season so far for Rutgers men's basketball. So even though it's my third part of the day following the two Rutgers football coaching hires, good news is worth covering. And like I said, I knew this was coming out, so I was waiting on it. So if you're listening to the two football podcasts, thank you. You're probably sick of me by now, but at any rate, we have to, I'm a big journey guy. I'm a big journey guy in the sense of every step along the way, we have to appreciate and recognize. And this is a step. This is a step for the program to have two high school All-Americans in the same class, two high school All-Americans at all. I mean, they had one yesterday in program history. Now we have three. So that's something. And the pressure, the expectations, for this year, you never, as fans, it's never easy to deal with transition. It's never easy to deal with setbacks, right? And I've said for years now in all my coverage of Rutgers men's basketball that building the program, no trajectory is a straight line up, pointed up. There's ups and downs, and the Steve Pikiell era has certainly had ups and downs. It has not been pain-free. It has not been perfect. It has not been easy at times. But in his eighth year, he has done something unprecedented on the recruiting trail. And although we're not seeing those results translate on the court yet, and although expectations for next year are extremely high, we have to take every step in. And this is something. Now the game is going to be played April 2nd. We'll obviously talk about it plenty beforehand. April 2nd, Tuesday, April 2nd, the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas. It'll be on ESPN2 at 9 p.m. Harper and Bailey, by the way, are on the West team. I made a bet with someone that, how many times was I going to get mentions about this? But it's just, if you look at the rosters, they're 75% from the East Coast. So they have to balance it out. They're playing on the West. They're playing together. And as I tweeted, certainly not the last time these two will play together. And that is the reality of everything, is that Ace Bailey, the number 2 recruit in the country, and Dylan Harper, now number 3, are coming to Rutgers. And the reality of that is still unbelievable. Now, I get that things are very confusing right now. College basketball landscape is confusing. The NIL world is confusing. The transfer portal is confusing. And I think that it's making the context of this current season difficult to comprehend and process. Because here you have the two highest rated recruits in Rutgers basketball history coming to the program, 2 of the top 3 in the country in the current cycle. And yet this current roster had some serious challenges, NIL related, right? They lost Cam Spencer, they lost Paul Mulcahy. I've seen some debate lately. I mean, you can go back to my pods in May and June. I mean, the Cam Spencer thing was absolutely NIL motivated. Of course, a better situation. I mean, playing for the defending champs, but NIL was a huge factor. And NIL was a factor for Paul Mulcahy too. And I love Paul and I respect everything he's done for the program, but let's not be naive here. NIL was a major factor. And on the flip side, NIL was a major factor in how they were able to put the pieces back together in terms of assembling a roster for this season. First of all, you're way late in the game. You're past the transfer portal deadline for undergrads, and NIL funds were limited in terms of what they could do. So, like it or not, excuse or non-excuse, it's just Facts. Now, they have 2 monster recruits coming in. Obviously, NIL is a factor in that too. I think what we're seeing with Rutgers is like such an interesting test case. If you take your, you know, lenses off and just look at it from college basketball, I mean, Rutgers is a very fascinating example right now in terms of feast or famine with the transfer portal, with NIL, because it's certainly a factor here. Now we know Dylan is a national, has national endorsements already. Fanatics is one. There's been rumblings about, NIL coming from Adidas. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems like it would be, a pretty great situation if it was. It could be, outside of the collectives, NIL coming in. That's the other thing with NIL is there's no transparency, so you don't know. So it creates these perceptions and views and expectations that you don't know the full story. And I don't know the full story, but all I'm saying is I know that Rutgers was challenged with NIL for this current roster, and NIL is certainly a factor in helping bring in Dylan and Ace for next season. So where does that leave us? It leaves us right now with a disappointing start to this season and exciting prospects for next season. Now, that being said, even though Dylan and Ace are coming in, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be a fascinating offseason in terms of roster building. How is Steve Pikiell going to construct this roster around Dylan and Ace? Who stays? Who goes? Who do they bring in through the portal? We know that the rest of the recruiting class is highly touted, not nearly as highly touted as Ace and Dylan, obviously, but Lathan Somerville, Eric Bossi, a recruiting writer, national analyst, well-respected, wrote about Lathan Somerville from this past weekend. He had 27 points, 10 rebounds. He was talking about how he was just very versatile in his game, how he was able to facilitate a little bit. He's got a good handle for a big size. He certainly has, the competitiveness and the fierceness inside to play in the Big Ten. He talked about how physically, he's kind of have to redistribute his weight a little bit. He's going to have to get stronger. But he's a guy that had a late growth spurt that has some guard skills in him. He's going to be a stretch big, stretch 4 or 5, whatever he's going to be. And I think he's going to be in the rotation next year for sure. Bryce Dortch and Dylan Grant wings, they could be. You never know. I really like both of them in the long term. And I've talked about this before, Dylan and Ace projecting as one and dones. The other 3 are long-term pieces that are going to elevate the talent level in the program. So right now it's I haven't looked at his top 5 recruiting class nationally. But, I think you're looking at Dylan and Ace, obviously, going to start. Somerville, I think, is going to be the rotation. And then who else is going to be around them? Right. I think obviously keeping Mag for an additional year is huge. I mean, Cliff, you could keep for another year. He said he's not going to stay. I know, he's obviously not had the season he has hoped or anyone has hoped. Who knows? Jeremiah Williams, I think, is going to be a key piece. But, it's everything is so unpredictable now with NIL and portal. So you don't know what this offseason is going to bring. You don't know who's going to leave. You don't know who's going to come. But I will say that I think that last offseason served as a great learning experience for Rutgers basketball. I mean, it better be, right? It better be. And that's why we talk about NIL, and that's why the collectives are trying. That's why, there's been frustration with the administration, although you have hat tip to Pat Hobbs and Rutgers for this recent deal that was just announced. It was either yesterday or today. It's all mixed up in my head, but Prudential Financial signing an NIL deal with them. Men's and women's basketball directly impacted, and then potentially some other teams as well in terms of getting some investment accounts, getting investment advice, financial advice. But every player on men's basketball is going to get money to invest from Prudential. So that's huge. Again, that's not a needle mover in terms of the starting, in terms of retaining a starting 5. I mean, that's the thing with a lack of transparency in NIL. People don't realize what other Big Ten teams have, like what, just in terms of like what Illinois is paying their guys. I mean, listen, there was a low level, it's Power 5, right? But There was a recruit that Rutgers had lost that, got six figures from a losing Power Five team that couldn't compete in terms of NIL. So uh, there's so many factors out there, which makes it even more important to appreciate the fact that Dylan and Ace are coming. At the end of the day, relationships still matter. And Steve Peichel has done everything in terms of building relationships. Brandon Knight, Smoke Williamson, TJ Thompson, everyone else in the program. I mean, they deserve endless praise for what they've done in terms of getting these two guys to come to Rutgers. I know the nervous Nellies out there and say, well, Dylan's not signed and Ace could ask out of his. I mean, yes, of course. I mean, an asteroid could fall tomorrow and we could all die. Anything's possible. You can't ever rule anything out. That's true. I agree. But the point is I think there's confidence to believe they're going to come, and let's just enjoy it. Can we just enjoy it? Can we just not be nervous Nellies? Can we not? I've seen people admonishing the idea that they might be one and done players. I mean, Ace Bailey right now is projected by Jonathan Gavoni as the number 2 prospect in the 2025 draft. He actually doesn't have Dylan in his top 5 right now. Dylan's got to be top 10, but I mean, they're both projected as lottery picks universally in the 2025 draft. So that's fine. If they're only at Rutgers for 1 year, they're only at Rutgers for 1 year. But I think the big part of this is that, and appreciating the McDonald's All-Americans and all the hoopla that comes with it is that the hope is that this is a permanent or a significant step in the building of the program. Whether Ace and Dylan are there for a year or not, longer, unlikely, but this is a transformational moment on the recruiting trail. Look who they're talking to in the 2025 class. Trey McKinney's a top 10 guard, top 10 recruit. They are, I mean, he is a guy that, and Smoke Williamson has a relationship with him. They're heavily involved in him. They've been talking to other guys too. I mean, Darius Adams was a top 25 guy. Probably, he transferred out of New Jersey and is in Indianapolis. His sister plays for women's basketball. It doesn't seem like prospects are looking great there. Darius Akoff isn't visiting anymore, but, they're in on multiple 4-star and 5-star guys. And McKinney would be an absolute gem in terms of if they're able to get him. So this could be the start of a lot. This could be a start of, regularly getting 4 and 5-star guys. And if you upgrade the talent in a permanent way and you're able to navigate through the portal, right? And it's true, NIL is so important in all this. But the hope is that this build is just over time continues to get better and better and better. And this is a jumping off point for the program. There's going to be some that are going to worry and say this is going to be an outlier. It's going to be a flash in the pan. And what if they don't succeed? What if they don't? I mean, people talking about they're going to win the national title. That's for another day. But, no, I wouldn't put Rutgers in the national title conversation next year, even with Dylan and Ace. I mean, we have to see there's so much that's going to happen in the offseason before you could say that. Just appreciate the fact that these two otherworldly talents, and I think Ace Bailey is going to end up being a generational talent. I mean, everybody talks about football, right? With the NFL and, all the players in the playoffs and the AFC Championship. We have Pacheco versus Gus Edwards. And, think about the benefit that's going to come in the coming years when Ace and Dylan are balling out in the NBA and they're Rutgers players. The benefit of that's going to be huge. This is a transformational moment. And there's transformational moments along the way in that greater moment. And this is one of them. Them becoming McDonald's All-Americans. They're both having great seasons. Spring can't come soon enough, or early summer, for them to arrive. And really, the continuity of this. That's the other thing with the portal, right? Is the continuity of the roster was very disjointed last year. And then guys they got, I mean, there's a lot of injuries. In terms of Noah Fernandes, even Jeremiah Williams, who still isn't eligible, and that's a whole nother story with NCAA. I'm not optimistic. Austin Williams, who signed really late, Ebola, obviously Mag. I mean, even though they went overseas, there was not a lot of continuity otherwise in terms of the roster. So that's key too. It's not just, and listen, I know people don't want to hear this, but one positive, right, of if this team does not go dancing, which it doesn't look like they will at this juncture, although they don't have any bad losses. You beat Purdue at home on Sunday, and all of a sudden, with the schedule opening up, it's possible. It's possible. Don't get mad at me for saying that. But my point is, if they don't make the tournament, right, you actually have, you could argue, you have a little bit of an advantage in terms of reshaping that roster right away, right away. So you just have to look at things in the big picture. And I know everyone gets caught up emotionally, and I do too, and it's been a frustrating season, and they've shot poorly, very poorly. And it's frustrating because, metrics wise, I mean, even though they haven't had some good defensive games in the Big Ten, they're still third best in terms of defensive efficiency in the Big Ten. If they were just an average, slightly below average offensive team, they would be a lot better. So we've talked about that a lot. My point in all this is that Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are coming to Rutgers. They're McDonald's All-Americans. The perception of the program continues to change. I mean, you're talking about Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Alabama. Nate Oates is just a recruiting maven. I mean, they get 5-star after 5-star. If you haven't looked at their roster, I mean, their roster is so stacked. And then Rutgers, I mean, that is a huge perception changer. And that's going to be in the news for the next few months. So appreciate all the steps that are happening. I know I am. And it's a great day for the program. And there's a lot more great days coming. And those two players are going to leave a huge impact in the program, but it's not the end point. It's a jumping off point. And again, having the whole class that they're having come in with Lathan Somerville, I'm super excited to have in the program. But, Ace and Dylan, even if it's 1 year, guys, just appreciate it. Like it's going to be so, I mean, these guys are supremely talented. They're going to come in with an edge. They have something to prove. They have, real chutzpah for coming in, right? They could have taken the easy route and gone to a blue blood, and they're not. And you're going to love these guys. You're going to love watching them, but you're going to love their attitudes and their chippiness. And it's an exciting time. And even though it's a transition year right now, today, things can change quickly. And just don't, I mean, people get mad when you say, well, before Michael got here, well, that was 8 years ago, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But fans that have been fans of this program since the Final Four in 76, how many ups and downs have we been through, right? And this season as a down, yes, it's a down, but it's not a way down. Things have certainly been worse over time. And unfortunately, I think especially in this era, the portal and NIL, certain programs are going to have up and downs. And I think that's the hope now, right? With Dylan and Ace is that it elevates your floor long term. That's the hope. And that, I think, is as important as anything in this conversation. By the way, side note, this whole thing that recruiting analysts are starting to call them burger boys in terms of making the McDonald's All-American game. I've seen a couple recruiting guys say that. Can we just, that's cringy. Can we just stop that? Burger boys? Like, please. We're talking about all future, for the most part, NBA players that are the most talented basketball players in the game. And we're calling them burger boys. It just, I don't know. It's cringy to me. Maybe I'm old now. I mean, I am getting old, but maybe I'm just, on my front porch. So I need to get off my lawn now. I don't know. But the bottom line is, I just hope everyone can take a step back, take a breath, and just appreciate this moment and be super excited for the future. And listen, there's a lot that goes on. And this season has not wavered my confidence in Steve Pike on the coaching staff whatsoever. And unfortunately, the plan hasn't been executed on the court the way they had hoped. And at the end of the day, they're ultimately responsible for that. And they have to do a better job. And this season isn't over yet. So at any rate, thanks for listening to my rant or my ramble or whatever this may be. I don't even know if I covered all my points. It's the end of the day. I got to get going. But thank you for listening and watching. Once again, I have some football content. David Anderson's back this week. I have some Rutgers basketball coverage coming up as well. I have a couple guests related. So we got a lot going on, and appreciate everyone's support once again. And we'll talk to you on Wednesday.